Now the case is in the hands of the Department of Homeland Security, who will be deporting this individual from our country. These agencies are working together in a collaborative way to follow President Trump's directive to eradicate MS-13 and foreign terrorists from United States soil. So this is an individual who was detained and arrested because of the president's policies, and he will no longer be residing in the United States of America. And our
I'm just trying to get some clarity on it, Caroline, because you know, if indeed he is what we were told he is, the East Coast leader of MS-13, wouldn't it make sense to prosecute him for crimes related to that? I know he was held on a gun charge, but to make sure that any victims of MS-13 through his leadership get their day in court here in the United States, and then send him to an El Salvadoran prison if he is deported and found guilty on those crimes.
Once Fox News starts asking Trump administration officials why they're violating the Constitution, you know they've crossed way too many lines.
Well, again, this administration is doing things differently, Martha, and this president has made a directive to his agencies, particularly the Department of Homeland Security, to remove foreign terrorists from America's homeland to protect American citizens. And we have an incredible diplomatic relationship with the president of El Salvador and his government, who have been detaining these MS-13 ringleaders and violent gang members in their prisons. And American taxpayers don't have to foot the bill for that cost. And so, again, the bottom line
here, the Supreme Court said that the Alien Act could be used to remove people, but they had to reach due process first. I'm only pressing on this because it was a huge story and we covered it. Obviously, it would feel like that person could lead to a lot of other evidence. The DOJ would be pressing to see this in court so that other people could be exposed, and suddenly none of that's happening. So can you explain why the change of course in this particular case?
Again, what I can tell you is that the president gave a directive to eradicate MS-13 ringleaders and gang members from our nation's communities. That is what's happening here. And to anyone who believes that these individuals should be living in America, the American people think differently. That's why they reelected this president by a historic margin. And
that's not what we're suggesting. We're just asking if he's, should be held in a prison somewhere until he faces justice in the country.
Martha McCallum even tried to appeal to the other side of providing people their due process that includes victims' families receiving justice, or that evidence uncovering more illegal acts that gives other victims that chance at seeing justice being done. But justice isn't an element of fascism.
Who's to blame here in your view? Congress for writing such a stupid law that promotes illegal immigration, or the Supreme Court's interpretation?
The alien's to blame. The alien enters this country legally, which is a crime. He's the MS-13 gang member according to our intelligence and even that of the intelligence of El Salvador. He was given withholding and removal from El Salvador because of fear of gang violence. Let's be clear. President Bukele has changed the whole face of El Salvador. He's attacked gang violence there. The country is much, much safer than it was when the court made this ruling. So listen, the Supreme Court say we'll facilitate. We'll facilitate. However, we got to remember, he's an El Salvadoran national in custody of the El Salvadoran government. So, we'll facilitate what we can, but I think we made the right decision.
An entire justice system based on what people like Donald Trump, Tom Homan, and thumbhead Stephen Miller think is true after admitting they were wrong.
He was not mistakenly sent to El Salvador.
Okay, so do you still believe
he's an illegal
he is a
alien
member of
from
MS?
El Salvador? Hold on, this is important. In 2019, he was ordered deported. He has a final removal order from the United States. These are things that no one disputes. Where is he from? El Salvador. Where is he a resident and citizen of? El Salvador. Is he here illegally? Yes. Does he have a deportation order? Yes. A DOJ lawyer who has since been relieved of duty, a saboteur, a Democrat, put into a filing incorrectly that this was a mistaken removal. It was not. This was the right person sent to the right place. Now, some have said, well, but he had a thing called a withholding order. So a withholding order means you've been ordered deported, but an immigration judge is saying you cannot go back to a particular country. Here's the thing. If you are a member of a foreign terrorist organization, you cannot have a withholding order. Since he's in MS-13, there is no withholding order. Furthermore, the gang that he is accused of being persecuted by doesn't exist anymore in El Salvador. The 18th Street gang is gone. So you have an illegal alien from Bill, Where are we supposed to send the illegal alien from El Salvador?
You haven't even
to
allowed
what
me
country?
to ask you a question. Are you convinced he is still a member of MS-13? That was your original charge.
Yes. But here's the thing, Bill. Yes, but here, not only am I convinced of it, not only is El Salvador convinced of it, Bill, he's an illegal alien from El Salvador.
Stephen Miller is so insufferable, Bill Hemmer couldn't take the whining and yelling anymore. So to the people still trying to give some kind of benefit of the doubt to these people that are justifying authoritarian rule, is this fascism yet? Because here comes his attorney general and his advisor on authoritarian affairs making it extremely clear.
Let's hear the question from this very low-rated anchor at CB.
Thank you, President. Do you plan to ask President Bukele to help return the man who your administration says was mistakenly deported? The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual at El Salvador's sole discretion was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
no version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
But you could release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. We just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
Mr. President, you said that if the Supreme Court said someone needed to be returned, that you would abide by that. You said that on Air Force One just a few days ago. And they said that it must be facilitated.
Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that? Why do you go over and over? And that's why nobody watches you anymore. You have no credibility.
Open defiance of the Supreme Court, wondering why a journalist is asking questions about constitutional rights instead of congratulating him for sending people off to brutal foreign prisons. If you're okay with fascism, it'll still eventually come for you.
Yeah, I said homegrowns are next. The homegrowns built. You got to build about 5 more places.
Yeah, that's big.
All right. It's not big enough.
No, yeah.
Come on. So this is a much different office.
He said homegrowns are next. So El Salvadorian President Bukele is going to need to build 5 more prisons to house American citizens that Marco Rubio isn't given the orders to strip green cards from.
You mentioned that you're open to deporting individuals that aren't foreign aliens but are criminals to El Salvador. Does that include potentially U.S. citizens, fully naturalized Americans?
If they're criminals and if they hit people with baseball bats over their head that happen to be 90 years old, and if they rape 87-year-old women in Coney Island, Brooklyn, yeah, that includes them. What, do you think there's a special category of person? They're as bad as anybody that comes in. We have bad ones too. And I'm all for it because we can do things with the president for less money and have great security. He does a great job with that. We have others that we're negotiating with too.
Despite the played-out excuse that he's only joking about expanding his gulag plan to include natural-born citizens, this guy has confirmed this portion of his stand-up act multiple times.
El Salvador, the president there said he would be willing to take American citizens in the federal prison population. Is that one of the ideas you're going to be discussing?
Well, I love that. If we could take some of our 20-time wise guys that push people into subways and that hit people over the back of the head and that purposely run people over in cars, if he would take them, I'd be honored to give them. I don't know what the law says on that, but I can't imagine the law would say anything different. If they can house these horrible criminals for a lot less money than it costs us, I'm all for it. But I'd only do according to the law. But I have suggested that, why should it stop just at people that cross the border illegally? We have some horrible criminals, American grown and born. I think if we could get El Salvador or somebody, but to take them, I'd be very happy with it, but I have to see what the law says. Okay.
He keeps saying he has to check with the law, while ignoring the law and the Constitution that already answered this question. And based on his track record for identifying criminals without a shred of evidence or due process, he's obviously looking to target anyone that hurts his fragile feelings by doing something illegal, like speaking or something. So now that he's crossed all the lines that petrified establishment types kept drawing in the sand, assuming that he'd never do it, what will the elected leaders that claim to represent Americans do?
His story and his fate are a cautionary tale for every single American. If this administration will start to strip away the constitutional rights of people who have the right to be in this country, they will start with the people who are vulnerable, whom they can paint as undesirable, even if they lie about that, and they will slowly move on to other folks. In fact, we've seen that start to happen already. Legal residents have been harassed. DACA recipients have been harassed. Even United States citizens have been harassed by this administration. And I want to say one last word about El Salvador. A beautiful country, but a country with a leader who has become a mercenary. A mercenary who it looks like is complicit in violating human rights. Make no mistake, Kilmore and others who have been deported, some on shaky grounds under the Alien Enemies Act, are in gulags. They are in torture prisons. And President Bukele is responsible for that. And at some point, he also must